Welcome back to the LaunchFamily Podcast, where we have honest conversations about parenting, learning, and family life in the seasons that don't come with a manual. I'm your host, Jessica Shelley, mom of seven, former educator, and co founder of LaunchFamily. Today's conversation is especially for parents who feel like life didn't go according to the plan that they imagined and are trying to figure out how to support their kids and themselves in the middle of that in between space. My guest today is Laura A. Gaines, a child and adolescent therapist with over 20 years of clinical experience as a trainer, curriculum writer for more than 3 decades, and a lifelong advocate in the fields of developmental disabilities and mental health. Laura brings a rare and deeply compassionate blend of both professional expertise and lived experience. She's an adoptive parent of a child with significant trauma history, a parent to another child by birth, and the mom of 2 kids with learning disabilities, which means she understands neurodiversity and trauma-informed care not just as frameworks, but as everyday realities. Right now, Laura's work focuses on the powerful intersection of neuroinclusion and trauma-informed care, and how those two lenses together help families, teams, and relationships build real sustainable resilience. She writes and teaches about what it means to support growth when safety, connection, and trust come first, especially in what she calls liminal seasons, which are those times when things feel uncertain, stretched, or unfinished. So if you've ever wondered, why does this feel so hard? Am I doing something wrong? Or what does resilience actually look like in a real family like mine? This conversation is for you. Laura, I'm so grateful you are here. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. And I feel
Yes.
like you're in one of those liminal spaces.
Oh, yeah. All any of those seasons, right? Like we can all be in them in different, periods of
Mhm.
time. Well, I want to start off with just giving our listeners a little bit of context for who you are. So,
Mhm.
you've said that you've been in this work your whole life. What does that actually mean to you? Or like what does that actually look like?
Well, I'm the oldest daughter in a family of 3. My younger brother had very severe asthma when I was 4, and so I think that was the beginning, make sure your brother's okay. And my sister was born when I was 6. By 13, I was parenting the neighbor's children who had significant developmental disabilities.
Oh, wow.
And I really, enjoyed them and loved being able to care for them and had to learn a lot because they were not typical kids. So when I say my whole life, like, literally since toddler. But then I went into and got a bachelor's in psychology and a master's in social work, and then worked first in the field of developmental disabilities and then in the field of mental health. So it really has been a lifelong passion.
How did that transition go, I guess, from, working primarily in developmental disabilities, and then what kind of pushed you into child and adolescent mental health?
I started working officially with developmental disabilities, with adults in group homes,
Mm.
both in New York, and then when I moved to Ohio, I came to Ohio to get my master's degree. So there I studied mental health more. And then I was working for the Nisanger Center, OSU, which is a research and training institute on developmental disabilities, where I had the chance to get to know a multidisciplinary team. So I learned about it not just from my own, vantage point, but from OT, PT, speech, neurology, nursing, pediatrics, audiology, like the whole, we even had a special dental clinic in the building for people with special needs. So if they had special or they didn't understand or they were nonverbal, there were people there that understood them that could also meet their dental needs.
Mm.
So that kind of concept of whole person. And I really enjoyed that work. And then I went to work at an agency for children um, who had been diagnosed or were at risk of delays. And that got me interested in the larger family. And from there, I started working part-time for an agency that did parenting support. And one day they put a sign up that said, "We really need therapists who will work with children." And I was like, "Pick me, I will work." And I did that for 20 years. I worked at that agency and then in private practice. And I saw children all the way up to adolescents um, in therapy and mental health.
Incredible. So you work with families for decades. Have you seen any threads across all of it? Any trends or typical things that families struggle with, or anything that you wanna share from that?
I think one of the biggest things families struggle with is they get very, very, very focused, particularly if there's a child who has significant needs, whether those needs are developmental or behavioral or mental health. The focus all becomes, what does this child need? And we 100% lose track of, what does dad need? What does mom need? What do the other kids need? And parents often end up sacrificing themselves, which in the long run really does not help their children. And so one of the things I talk to parents all of the time is, you know how, and you do this, I'm sure, as a parent, you get to that point in your day where you're like, all right, wait a minute, what does this kid need? What does that kid need? What do I need to do for dinner? What do I need to do for the laundry? Have I fed the cat? And so you do what I call roll call. You know, you go through the what do I need to do next? And you think about all the people and all the responsibilities. And the one person you leave out is, what do I need? At no point during roll call do you think, what do I need? And so my advice, and this sounds odd until you start doing it, is that when you're doing it, you say, what does Jessica need? Because when you think, what do I need? Your automatic response, particularly as a mom, is, I'm good. I'm good. I'll worry about me when everything else is done. And so I asked parents to start saying, well, what does Jessica need? And I would send parents home with that homework, and especially mothers of young children would come back and I said, so what did you learn when you did roll call and included yourself as a kind of a third person? And they were like, oh my God, I needed to pee.
I was gonna say that would be at the top of my list: water or bathroom.
Right, right. Or I'm so thirsty, or I don't remember when I last ate.
That's another
And
one.
an actual plate of food that was actually my food. Like I ate the crackers they would and the grapes that looked funny and, ew, I don't like this applesauce. You put too much cinnamon on it. That's what you end up eating. So my advice is when you're thinking about what does everybody need? You literally think of yourself in third person. What does Jessica need? What does Laura need? And that's the beginning of caring for yourself, which makes you a better, stronger parent, and setting an example for your children that they should care for themselves and that they should respect the needs of others.
I love that too, of like the mindfulness of others too, right? Of like, oh yeah, mom's gonna have some water now too, or mom's gonna take 5 minutes and
Mhm.
have a snack or go to the bathroom. Alone, maybe I'll add like a little
Right,
asterisk.
right.
um, But yeah, I think that that makes a lot of sense too. And one of the things that I experience in my household, so I have one of my sons, he has ADHD and autism, and it is often like the fire in your face, right? Of like I
Mhm.
need to de-escalate or work through whatever it is and get him set on something. So what would you say is like the biggest misconception for parents like when they are in that focus zone on that kiddo? Whether that be as like a whole pattern or like in the moment. What's the biggest misconception that parents should maybe release right now about like learning differences in general or like life when you're so focused on your child? I think you kind of got at that a little bit with like focusing on your needs too, but anything
Mhm.
that you want to kind of clarify for them?
Kids aren't doing this on purpose. The behavior that they do that is irritating you, it probably isn't serving them either. And often we get in our head and we start with a, why is he doing this? And he's doing it for attention and he's on my last nerve, and that's not it. One of
Mhm.
my least favorite phrases is, oh, they're just doing it for attention. And I'm like, okay, we are social primates. We do everything for attention. Like, you and I both brushed our hair to come on camera because we want to look decent to the people who are going to look at us. So when we say so and so did it for attention, maybe, but that would make that normal. So if a kid is, maybe they are screaming for attention, possibly because they have no other means of communicating, or in the moment their emotions are overwhelmed or their coping skills are overwhelmed and they really don't have another means right then and there. Um, yeah, sometimes it's because that's what works and we reward it. So maybe we need to work with them on a different system. But are they looking for attention? Absolutely. Like the ultimate punishment in every society, other than, chop off their head, that's the ultimate punishment. But other than that, shunning, solitary confinement, timeout, out of the group, you can't sit at our lunch table, we've removed you from the group chat. The ultimate punishment in human society is you're out. You're not part of our group anymore. And seeking attention and seeking to be part is normal behavior. The thing is, if kids are neurodivergent, they're not going to go about it typically because that's not how their brains are wired. If kids have a trauma history, their brains have literally been changed by their traumatic experiences. And so their behavior is going to be different than a typical kid because they're coming from a trauma perspective. And they're not doing it on purpose to be aggravating. And sometimes we have to include them in a, well, what do we need right now? You know, your kid with ADHD and autism, maybe they need grounding, maybe they need to take a walk, maybe they need a hug, or maybe they need the reverse. Maybe they need people to step back and just give them some time to, get it out of their system.
I love that perspective. I mean, and sometimes too, it's not about whatever is like right there, right? Like if they're having a moment about like a cheese stick or something or a wrapper, like it's probably not about the cheese stick or the wrapper. There's probably
Right.
something else underneath, and it's like, oh, there's too many people at the table. Like I remember um earlier on when he was kind of going through toddlerhood, we would go to restaurants just for the sheer, like, experience of sitting in a place with
Mhm.
other people and background music, and people don't even think about that necessarily when you go to a restaurant of like, "Oh, there's music happening in the background, there's a lot of people, there's people coming to the table, asking questions, there's a menu,
Yep.
I have to make a decision." And so we worked with him a little bit on, planning ahead of like going through the menu ahead of time. Like, what are you going to say when they ask you what you want to order or, finding those safe spaces for him. Um, but again, it's not about that he doesn't want to be out to eat or like, it's just that he's processing something and it feels a little different, in the
Yeah.
moment. So I love that you talk about that. In your time that you've worked with, families, adolescents, young adults, has there been any student that's kind of changed the trajectory that you have or like a lens of your practice or anything? Like one of those like memorable moments or stories that you want to share?
One big one was I was a field placement supervisor at Ohio State. So when I worked at the Nice Center, I had a lot of students who were in their social work field placement with me. And one was a young woman, senior in college, brilliant when it came to reading the room and understanding families. So one of the tasks we had would be a professional, say the pediatrician would be interviewing a family, and we social workers would be watching through a one-way mirror and just kind of reading the dynamics in the room because there'd be the doctor, the mom, and the dad. Sometimes the kid was in there, sometimes not. And while the doctor's trying to get medical information, we're looking for like, how does this family interact? What are their stress levels? How are they thinking and talking about their child? What clues do we get before we go into our own interview? This young woman could listen to one of those and just had the most amazing insight. And she's like, well, this and this and this is going on. And did you notice that was okay until this came up? And then he got really upset or he looked, and she's like, I think we should ask about that, aspect of their child. So I was really looking forward to the first time she had a case that was hers that she was in charge of. And so it rotated depending on the student, and it was her turn to write the written report. And I got this written report back from her, and I was like, this is horrible. It was so disorganized and rambly, and I was really disappointed. And so as nicely as I could, I was like, it seems like you had a really busy week and you didn't have a lot of time to put into this. In my head, I'm thinking, "You wrote this at 2 a.m. yesterday."
Mm. Yeah,
Like,
yeah. College
we should be
student,
in town.
things happen. Things happen.
Right. And she's like, "No, I worked on it for days and days and days." And I was like, "Oh, wait a minute." And I was like, "Tell me what it's like to write, and what is it like for you writing?" And then she talked about how difficult it was and how she usually had people edit her work. And I'm like, "Well, what is reading like?" And she goes, "Oh, I always form a book group in every class I've ever taken, and we take turns reading the book out loud to one another. In every class I've ever taken, I look around the room and find someone who's got really organized notes and ask if I can have a copy of them because I can't listen and take notes at the same time." And I was like, so have you ever been tested for learning disability? And she's like, no, no, I'm just probably not that smart. Now, she had mild cerebral palsy. She walked with hand canes. And what I think happened was every teacher and professor she ever had looked at her mild physical disability and thought that it explained her disorganized writing. But it didn't, because those are different parts of your brain. The motor part of your brain is not the same part of your brain that organizes words. And here she is, a senior in college, and I'm like, I think you might have a learning disability. Now, I couldn't diagnose it. It's very important that I stay in my lane. But my job as her social work field placement supervisor was to validate that, yes, you are ready to go out as a professional into the field. And one thing social workers do a lot of is write notes and write reports. And I'm like, this young woman is not ready. So I insisted, required that she go to the Office of Disability Services and be tested. She was not happy. But it turned out she had an undiagnosed learning disability.
For
Yeah.
so long. Senior in
For so
college,
long, for so
gone through
long.
K-12, the first 4 years of university, and no one has, like, asked a question. And, oh my goodness. What happened next? And now I wanna know what happened.
So at first she was really mad at me, but then when she
Oh,
went through the testing and got the report back, she was like, "Oh, I had no idea." And then I sat down with her and I made time to make sure to sit down and I was like, "What do you understand about what this says about you?" And she said, "Well, it's really weird because they said I have a really strong IQ." She goes, "I've always thought I was the dumbest kid in class
oh my
because
goodness.
everything was always so hard for me." And I'm like, "No, no. In fact, you are one of the brightest, most persistent, with great resilience, great perseverance, most creativity. You created an entire educational career of accommodation all by yourself without adults helping you." I said, "You're brilliant in more ways than just IQ." And so we went back and we looked at what her official IQ score and what the thing said about her learning disabilities. I'm like, so a learning disability is like a learning difference.
Mhm.
You can understand everything your textbooks say, but you need to hear it because you can't read it off a page. You will be capable of writing organized reports, but you probably need, back in the day, it was dragon speak. She probably needs talk to text. I'm like, you have amazing insight. And your struggle with reading and writing should not be a barrier because you have the knowledge. You just need to find, and like there was the ability with the secretary we had. I'm like, just dictate your report and let someone else type it. And
Amazing.
that produced a much better report when she wasn't struggling with the writing part. And so I was able to help her reframe how she identified herself because she really thought she was slow. And I'm like, my gosh, no.
What are some more of those common, false conclusions that kids might draw about themselves based on their struggles? Like whether they know that they have something or they don't. Like, what are some of those thoughts or phrases that you've heard kids say?
Well, the other one that I heard a lot was in the mental health world. I would have a kid who'd been through something really difficult. They had a trauma experience, or perhaps they had inherited. There's some mental health diagnoses that are very heritable. So maybe they had high levels of anxiety or depression, and the kids would be like, I know, I'm crazy."
Mm.
And my answer was like, "No." And sometimes I'd use really strong language depending on how old they were. "No, the stuff you've been through is crazy." I had one girl who'd been through horrifying abuse, and I'm like, "The blankety blank blank you've been through is crazy. The fact that you have behaviors in response to that is normal. It is your brain and body's attempt to protect you and to seek, recognize danger and to keep you safe going forward. Now, do those behaviors help you now and today? No, now they're getting in the way. So a common response for someone with a trauma history is to be, very vigilant. So they're always like, who's here and what are they doing and what are they saying? And that meant she couldn't focus in class. If she was sitting in class and she could see through the window somebody walk by the door, she was just like, there's a man in the building. I don't know. Who is he? Why is he here? What's going on? And then she couldn't learn. And she's like, I know I'm crazy. I'm distracted. I'm bad. And I'm like, no, you've had people treat you badly. You're trying to keep yourself and your classmates safe. We need you to learn different coping skills. We need you to learn to recognize my body's being hypervigilant, but I'm in a safe space and adults will take care of this. Or if it's really bad, that you can go to your teacher and say, I'm feeling really distracted. I'm worried about something. Can I touch base with a guidance counselor? Like, let's give you coping skills. You're not crazy. You're coping the best you can with what you had, but we can experiment with different ways to change that.
I love that you phrased it that way too, because it's like they go from identity, right? Or like if we've gone through it, like as parents too, like all of us, right? Our
Mhm.
human condition is that we kind of own that as our identity, like, oh, I'm just dumb, or oh, I'm just slow, or oh, I'm just, not smart, or oh, I'm blah 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 blah, fill in the
Right.
blank, right? But the way that you just framed it is really about, oh no, this external thing happened or is what it is, but you still have this choice on what you can now do with this information moving forward. And that feels incredibly empowering too for someone who's been through something like, oh, I don't have to let this control me forever. Um,
Mhm. Mhm.
so wow, that's incredible. I wanna tap into like the parent audience too that's listening in. How can parents maybe spot some of these challenges earlier? Like maybe what are some behaviors that they might see or things that their child might say? And also then be able to respond without being like in a panic.
Right, right. And the thing is, nobody's perfect. And
Mhm.
even, I give parenting advice. There's books and reams of parenting advice out there. And honestly, the best parenting advice is don't expect yourself or your kids to be perfect because that
Mhm.
doesn't exist. I knew I was talking to a healthy parent when they were like, I don't know what's going on. I'm not sure what I'm doing. I think I'm making mistakes. Can you give me some ideas? And I'm like, oh, look, healthy parent. The parent that walked in and was like, I'm the best parent you're ever going to meet, and I've got this down. I was like, oh no, I've got a problem. Because we don't come, I'm a therapist and I made mistakes as a parent. It's we're not trying to raise perfect children. We're trying to raise resilient children, decent human beings. So all we have to be is decent human being and resilient, which means if you do make a mistake, you say, I was really tired and cranky and I yelled at you, and that probably wasn't the best way to handle that. Let's try this again. Um, but keeping an eye on kids, like the standard is if they're 2 years behind in an academic subject, then you want to advocate. And this is where you want to find someone that knows about special education advocacy. The one thing I worked with a lot of my parents is that school districts know how to say no in 1,000 different ways. They never say to you, no, we won't help your child. They say, well, maybe it's a phase. It's a growth spurt. We're going to give them a little support. We'll see how things go. All of those are no's. A yes is let's have a meeting, let's do some testing, let's find out more about what's going on and come up with a plan. And you can get help. You can find special ed advocates that know what they're talking about to back you up. Mental health issues. It's hard because the younger a child, the less they look like a diagnosis. I would literally say to parents, they're growing into something, or maybe it's a phase. My goal, especially for a little kid, so 3 to 10, 12, was never to be like, let's absolutely figure out what their diagnosis is when they're an adult. But let's figure out where they're struggling now and how we help them have better coping skills, how we help you or their school be more supportive, give them what they need in the moment, and we'll sort out what this is turning into or if it's a phase in the long run. And diagnoses are not um, they're not prescriptions. When you say someone has ADHD, it doesn't mean they can't sit still. It means that sitting still is hard for them. When you say that someone has, bipolar disorder and they have major mood swings, it means that they have to take care of it and they have to work to find the balance that works for them. There's no one picture of what that looks like in adulthood. And so a lot of people jump to a conclusion of, oh, it's like that character I saw in a movie or the one person I know with this diagnosis. And it's like, no, if you have a diagnosis, if you have a situation, you still have agency, you still have personality, you still have choices. But you may also have to put some more work into it or set some boundaries around it. Like I know an adult who had bipolar disorder, and she said, I can't do caffeine and I can't pull all-nighters. Like I have learned that those are the beginning of an episode. And so she said and she traveled for work, changing time zones. And she said, I don't tell my colleagues because I don't need them to jump to conclusions, but I'm very protective of my sleep. And I can't make up for short sleep with a boatload of caffeine. So I just say to them, sorry, I got to go to bed. When everyone else is going to sit up and talk, she's like, I just leave. She protects her sleep. And for her, that was a key to keeping things, steady.
Awesome. I mean, I think those are super practical strategies too, of like even just observing yourself as a parent in that role, right? Of what boundaries do you might need to set in order to make sure that you're also healthy? Kind of coming back to the first piece of like,
Yeah.
what do I need? um,
Yeah.
so that's so helpful. And I want to come back to like our very beginning intro section too, where we use this word liminal times and we
Mhm.
briefly described what it is, but that's like a phrase we don't ever hear really. So what does that mean? Let's just like break down the term. What does that mean in everyday parenting language?
Liminal times is when things are changing and you're not sure what the end is going to look like. And parenting includes a lot of that because, just when you get a kid's sleep schedule down, they decide not to take the second nap. Um, there's big liminal time. There's expected liminal times, like the time from graduation from high school to adulthood, whether it's college or work or combination. Like we think we know where this is going, but we don't. And there's a big shift. Other times there are liminal times that we don't anticipate or expect. Somebody gets a diagnosis, there's an accident, there's a divorce. I had a neighbor who told me that he and his wife were divorcing, and I'm like, okay, you're not going to want to hear this, but that's a 2-year process. 2 years from now, you're going to wake up and life is going to feel normal. But from now till then, there's a lot that's going to change and a lot of feelings and a lot of communication and a lot of adjustment. That's a liminal time in your life where you really can't even imagine what normal feels like, but you will get there. And he was like, "No way, 2 years. This has got to be over." And I'm like, "I'm sorry, but really, divorce with kids, 2 years from now you wake up and life will be different and it'll be okay. And you'll have figured out a new balance. But from here to there, there's going to be a lot of ups and downs, and that's a liminal time."
I think one of the words that's jumping out to me is this word resilience, maybe in
Mhm.
those liminal times, because it sounds like you don't know for an extended period of time of what's going to happen, but you also have to continue to like show up for yourself and show up for your kids and your job
Yeah,
and like all the things are still going on and you're
right.
just kind of I don't know. So,
Yeah.
how does resilience kind of play into those times? And then, how does that kind of play out across like the members of the family or the household?
So resilience is the capacity to bounce back. So people talk about that kind of resilience, like something bad happens and you recover. But the fact is you never go back to the way it was. You only go forward to a new time. I focus a lot on resilient. What does it take to be resilient during liminal times? So, where can you go to tap into strength, well being, and a sense of balance during times where things are all up in the air. And some of that are those basics, like, what do I need? Am I eating okay? Am I sleeping? Am I drinking water? Sorting out for yourself, what are the things that really ground me? And it might be as simple as go for a 10-minute walk and, if I walk out my backyard, there's a little area of trees. Just to walk through the trees for a little bit, just to play in the dirt for a little bit is very grounding for me. Um, and figuring out for yourself what the recipe is for getting yourself back to like, oh, okay. My sister, it's exercise for sure. It's words for me too, like writing. If I really can't, I had one mom, she's like, I just can't even tell you how I feel. She goes, I tried journaling and it's just BS. I can't. So I said, well, go get one of those big art books, not a little journal with lines. Get a great big book and start with markers and just single words. And the first couple pages were just cuss words, just F this and and it was interesting. I said, just dump, dump, dump. Don't think about who's going to read it or who's going to look at it. Just so she was writing all these bad words, and then like, I hate this, I hate this, I hate this. I can't believe this is happening. This is so sucks. And then it's interesting, and then it turned into sentences, and then after a while, you could see she switched to a pen, and she was really writing. And then she switched a page and she drew a picture. And she goes, this kind of journaling works for me. And so for her, it was art and markers and scribbling. And then she brought in one page when she just took a black crayon and was like, she goes, this was Wednesday. And I'm like, oh, that was bad. But
I
for
love
somebody,
that, like, finding your own way too for expression, because it's like you see these things on social media and they're like, oh yeah, I feel so great. I start my morning with like this meditation or my special coffee or my walk outside in the sun, right? But it's like you've got to find what works for you, at the end of the day, because you live with yourself every day, not on
yeah.
social media. So I love that example that you just gave of journaling can look different too, like, and the permission to do that. Find out what works.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
in our last segment, I want to talk about the work that you're currently doing, which is so
Mhm,
inspiring and needed. And like, oh my gosh, how do these things work together? And so the work that you're doing is currently emphasizing neuro inclusion and trauma
mhm.
informed care together. Why is that powerful? Like, why is that pairing so powerful?
So neuroinclusion is the idea that there are lots of different ways that brains work. 20% of the population falls under this neurodivergent. So it might be ADHD, it might be autism, it might be learning disabilities. There's some kind of, they see and experience the world differently. Um, and then trauma-informed care is the idea that we don't know. We don't know what percentage of the population, and you don't know among your friends and neighbors and, members at church who has a trauma history and what might trigger somebody. And rather than demand that people prove their worth or prove that they need accommodation, that we go in with this concept that, well, we know different people need different things. We know that people might be triggered or upset or concerned or worried about different things. How about we just keep that front of mind and give everybody um, the chance to make some decisions, to have some choice. So, and you've seen this, I'm sure, when you've gone to the doctor. They're much more prone now to say, I'm going to look in your ear right now. Is it okay if I touch you? That's an example of trauma-informed care. Like, rather than just treating you like a piece of furniture that they can move around, they tell you what they're doing, they're telling you why they're doing it, and they ask before they do it. They tell you you can have someone else in the room. I met an architect who does neuro-inclusive and trauma-informed architecture. Like, let's build offices where you can control the light, where you can control the sound, where you're not bombarded. If there's heavy traffic out there, that we build a sound barrier. That if there's a side door that leads to a lawn, why don't we landscape it so somebody might be able to take a walk around some perennials and sit on a bench? Because we know that nature tends to be calming for most people. Um, and so it's the idea of, let's provide some accommodation or some control. Let's be upfront and explain things to people rather than expecting that we can just do what we want and not tell them what's coming next. And like you said with your kiddo with autism, like we're going to tell them where we're going. We're going to look at the menu in advance. We're going to practice some of our, what do you say to the waitress? How do you place your order? And it's that, but the thing is, all your kids are now exposed to that. You're not just doing that for the one child. Yes, you understand he might need it most, but if any other child joins that conversation, they are all then more informed. They are all then more capable and more comfortable, and they're more able to navigate the world. And it's the idea like when we built wheelchair ramps for people who need to use a wheelchair, people with a stroller, people on crutches, people with bad hips, like there's a lot of people using that ramp. And so when we can think about how are we more neuro-inclusive, how are we more trauma-informed, it doesn't just benefit the people who like absolutely need it. It benefits humans because we all have a day when we're like, could you not be so loud? Could it not be so bright? Could I could I have some control over the situation? So it benefits everybody's neurological system, everybody's sense of feeling traumatized or overwhelmed.
It's like that universal design, right? Like
Mhm.
it meets
Yeah.
this specific need, but it's also so universal for a variety of contexts. I I think too, like as a parent who's listening in, right? My brain is going towards, well, what can I actually do at my house, maybe to have more universal design? Or how can my kids learn to be more mindful of others if we're in public and they might see a kid, you know, having a
Mhm.
moment, right? And I think oftentimes parents are kind of sucked into those experiences because they're like, why are they doing that? Or like blah 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 or like whatever.
Mhm.
Because that's just like how kids are, right? Like they ask questions
Right.
and we're like, well, I don't know. They just need a moment or they're struggling with whatever, or we don't know. Maybe they're hungry. And so what's maybe like some takeaways for parents or strategies or things that they could maybe practice with their kids to kind of open up their child's eyes to neurodivergence in general and also
Mhm.
like that trauma background while it's still being like age appropriate. Like my kids are all under 10, so I'm not going to have those
Right.
hard conversations, but I'm sure that there's things that I could be doing right now to kind of broaden their horizons or open their eyes to that.
I think a lot of it is giving kids a vocabulary. And
Mm,
so, again, it starts with them so that they can say, I'm mad, I'm sad, I'm disappointed, I don't feel good. And some of that is we teach them our words, but then sometimes we use their words. I had one kid say, I'm so mad, I'm so mad, I'm just stuffed. And so I was like, what do you, he's like, I'm stuffed with anger. And I'm like, okay, so what helps you unstuff? How do we unstuff the anger? And
mm,
the same idea we talked about for us is my thing is we give kids ideas, but they have to run the experiment. Every
mm.
one of your, and you're the perfect example. You have so many kids. What works for one of them does not work for all of them. One kid calms down taking breaths. Another kid needs to jump up and down. Another one will sit in the corner with their books and just like, world, leave me alone. And another kid, you hand them a book, they might hurl it at your head. So probably not the best idea.
Have
Maybe
you been
that
to
kid,
my house? Because that sounds just like a normal Tuesday.
yeah, I've been accused of that before. And so it's helping kids learn that what helps you on stuff, what helps you when you're sad, what helps you. And it's two things. They learn what helps them, but it also teaches them that they then are responsible for unstuffing themselves or managing their feelings. And they can learn what helps them manage their own feelings and and respect that, well, that doesn't work for your sister. That doesn't work for your brother. You calm down by taking a run and they calm down by reading a book. What matters is that they calm down and that they feel okay. So then when you're out in public, you could be like, well, it looks like they're not having a very calm day. I hope that they find what they need to calm themselves. And that we all have that's the thing about abnormal behavior or kids with diagnoses or grown-ups with diagnoses. It's all just a range. The person I use the example of bipolar disorder, people who are bipolar have very intense highs and lows. We do too. They just don't come as often and they don't tend to be as like as intense for as long. But I've never met a mental health condition that I haven't said I'm like, "Oh, I've done that." Maybe not the way someone has it more intensely for longer stretches of time, but it's not like their behavior is completely beyond the pale of human existence. And so helping kids think, when have you been that upset? When have you been that mad? Because we've all been so mad we've done things we've regretted, um, even grown up sometimes. And teaching them that that's normal and it's okay, and we make amends and we move on and we try to learn different ways.
I love that. And I think too, like one of the things that is standing out is the house can also be like a really safe place for them to practice, right? And like what
Mhm.
better place to have like a trusted adult or like, hey, my brother's still gonna love me if I, you
Right.
know, have this moment. Like there's less
Well,
societal or social pressure, right? It within the home. And so I think, maybe coming back to just an example or the concrete sort of thing for my family was we as we were having this conversation about like how to order at a restaurant and you know that's something that we really value is the family meals and going out together as a family and all of those things. We actually ended up adopting that in our home. And so each of our kids now has a serve day and they go
no,
around it, they pretend and well, not really pretend. They actually do take the order. So they're like, "What
well,
vegetable would you like with lunch today?" Choices are carrots, cucumbers, or celery. Like that literally happened today. And so they're practicing the dialogue so that even when they get into that context when there is a stranger or a waiter or waitress, right, at the restaurant, it's like, "Oh yeah, no, they're serving me. They're here to help me, have my meal." And so it was just one of those things that we started integrating probably about a couple months ago just to reinforce the skills we were trying to like, hey, this is like low pressure, low key, like you're prepared for a kiddo that struggles with that sometimes. So I would just encourage add in a little note on top of Laura's, like, just encourage the practice and, like, the messiness of it, because I think that that's where it gets kind of fun too, is you can kind of troubleshoot with your kids of, "Oh, yeah, that worked," or, "Oh, man, I have no idea. We'll have to try something different next time," and owning that kind of humanness, even for
yes.
yourself of, like, "Oh, man, mom needed some deep breaths. That didn't work. I'm gonna try some ice water real quick." Like, whatever it could be. And yeah, that like the modeling I think is an incredible like teaching strategy. That's my background as a teacher. And so before we conclude, for parents that have listened to the episode today who might be feeling stuck or they're looking for additional support, what are some ways or resources that they can work with you or resources that you have
Mhm.
to share? And what can they expect from that?
So the easiest to access 24/7 for free is I have 3 years worth of blogs written, and
Amazing.
we have 2 specific ones that we, will tag in the show notes, and so one of them is about growing resilience in children. And the other one is you have needs. And it's the focus on as an adult, how do you care for your own? Like one of the very concrete examples in the you have needs is um, kind of silly, but like I have to drink a lot of water because one of the meds I'm on. And I used to carry a water glass up and down in my house. And finally I was like, you know what? It would be infinitely easier if I had one in the kitchen and one in my office. And then I thought, oh, I'm being so lazy. I'm using two. Okay, wait a minute. Who cares? Who cares? I have the water glass in my office and the water glass, and I change them every day. I dump them out, start with clean glasses the next day. But my space meets my needs, and I need to drink a lot of water, and that's what makes it easiest and works for me. So why not? Like, is that? And my wife at one point was like, "Are these both yours?" And I'm like, "Yep, yep." And it works. And why not? Like, it's not like we're short on classes or something. Um,
I love that.
So there's that one. So that's a easy. There's also some tools. So if you go to my website, which again's in the show notes, but it's learnmodelteach.com. And it's about learn resilience, model resilience, teach resilience. So learnmodelteach.com. There are also a tools section and there's a coping skills menu in there. And so you can create a coping skills menu for yourself by looking at how do you build some coping skills that you can start to reliably go to, because my advice is that everyone have like 10. Like ice water is great and it's quick. but it probably doesn't work when you're in the middle of a grocery store. So what works in the middle of the grocery store? And so and then there's some coping skills like take a nice long shower. That's great when you have the time and someone else to keep an eye on the kids. So having coping skills that take time and energy, and then having the quick, easy ones. So that's the first resource. I do some parent coaching. So people can go and sign up and we can do a free 15-minute consultation to just decide if that makes any kind of sense, or just to answer a quick question. So if someone wants a free 15-minute conversation, they can do that through the coaching section of my website. And then for anyone that's working with an organization, I do speaking and continuing ed talks as well. So sometimes people will learn about me through a podcast and then hire me to come talk at their organization.
Incredible. It's like well-rounded support for the well-rounded humans in our life, right? Like, however you need Laura, she's there in different capacities in different ways. And as she mentioned, we'll be sure to link everything in the show notes as well, especially those blogs and her website. So you can reach out to her. Well, Laura, I just want to say thank you so much. I appreciate how you hold both truths at the same time, that kids are incredibly capable and they also need some support that
I need
adults might
support.
miss even sometimes. And for the parents that are listening in, if you've ever worried, what if I'm getting this wrong? I want you to hear this, that the goal isn't perfect parenting. The goal is building safety and connection so that your child can grow skills over time. Laurel will be linking, as mentioned, to Laura's recommended blog series in the show notes so you can go deeper based on what your family needs right now. Be sure to check out her website as well, for that free consultation or for speaking engagements. And if this episode made you feel seen, share it with a parent who's carrying a heavy, complicated season. Until next time, we'll see you on the Lunch Family Podcast and have a great rest of your week.